Good evening, and welcome to Storytime with Stephanie. Storytime with Stephanie is a segment of the Writer's Anointing podcast that you can find on any of your major podcasting streaming platforms. The Writer's Anointing podcast is an opportunity for us to share tips and tricks and tools about the writing process and how you can write truly from the anointing of God. And so, Storytime with Stephanie, I'm so excited about the opportunity to be able to bring authors to the stage, those that you may not have heard about, those who have these powerful, amazing books and stories to tell. And this is an opportunity for them to do that. So tonight, we have with us Katherine Barner. Katherine is a grief and trauma expert. She's an award winning author and licensed psychotherapist with nearly 30 years of professional experience in the mental health field, working with local and state law enforcement agencies, domestic and sexual violence crisis centers, persons with substance abuse disorders, and those with severe and persistent mental illness, as well as the homeless population. She is no joke, y'all. She's the real deal. And so I'm excited to have Katherine with us tonight to discuss her book, God Help Me, I'm Grieving, Finding Healing After Loss. So, Katherine, are you with us tonight?
Hello, 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 Stephanie.
Hello, Katherine.
I am here. Thank you so much for having me. I am excited, and I'm looking forward to this conversation with you.
Excellent. Well, I'm excited to have you with us too. And this is a topic that, sometimes people don't want to touch on because they don't want to think about grief, they don't want to think about loss, and they don't want to think about trauma. However, it's something that we have to discuss, right?
Yeah.
It's something that's so it's near and dear to me because I fully understand loss, I fully understand trauma, and Lord knows I understand grief. I've walked through it, I have been stuck in it, and I'm so grateful that now I'm free from that. And so you're going to spend some time with us tonight talking about grief and loss and trauma and how people can really get to a place of finding healing after they've been through, loss or trauma. And so tell us a little bit more about your experience. And I can't even believe that you have 30 years of experience because you don't even look like whatever your age might be, you don't look it.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Every time somebody reads my bio, I have to go like, "Wow, has it really been that long I've been doing
Right.
this?" And it really has been that long. But God has been good, so
Yes.
I'll say that.
Amen.
But yeah, like you said, I've worked in mental health now for almost 30 years. But specific to the grief space, what I always say to folks is I have counseled individuals and worked with individuals throughout my time who experience different types of loss and different seasons of loss, and did that in a way that I was clearly able to walk them through, and what I say is give them all of the head knowledge to and help them move through. But for me, and in particular in writing the book, for me this book really came from my own personal experience, and that was in September of 2011. My mother passed away, and my mother was my everything. I say this all the time. She was my everything. And for me, after her death, I literally did not know how I was going to go on with my life. I didn't know what my life was going to be. My mother
Mm.
was that important to me, was that a large part of my life. And so what I came to was, if I am struggling the way that I'm struggling, knowing
Mm.
all of the things that I know about grief and having worked and having done all of the things that I've done in the mental health field, and then also even as a believer, if I'm
Mhm.
struggling the way that I am struggling, what
Yes.
in the world is everybody else doing? That was the thought
Exactly.
that I had. And so that was really the catalyst for the book. And obviously, because I had the head knowledge, the book knowledge, the experience, the professional experience, really did help me move
Mhm.
through and did help me in my healing process, and begin to understand what I needed to do. But the book was really written to help people understand grief, because I
Mhm.
think I don't think we do a very good job of helping people heal from grief.
Yeah.
Um, So it was really a way to give people something tangible that they could hold on to, not really heady, but something very, very practical that they could use to help them understand. And then what do I do? How do I move through this process
Mm,
in a way that's going to really help me get to healing? So that was the catalyst for the book. Like I said, and that's kind of what started me on really focusing more on grief. And that was, like I said, September of 2011. That's what did it. So, but I'm grateful, definitely grateful to be on the other side of it and be in a space now to really be able to talk to people about healing and even about my process.
yeah, I appreciate you sharing that because, even as I was going through the book, I could tell, I'm like, okay, she clearly wrote this from a personal space because you experienced a lot of loss in your
Hmm.
own life. And as I was reading this, and this is a quick read, y'all, because I actually read it last night and in a very short, short, very condensed time frame, and I got through the whole thing. You see all my little sticky notes everywhere. I'm like, this book is really so helpful. And as I was reading it last night, I realized that just the day before, so September the 10th, would have been my cousin's birthday. And my cousin
Mm,
was one of those losses that I experienced in December of 2012. And when I say I was stuck in grief, I was stuck for probably 8 years. Eight
yeah.
years I was stuck in grief, and I didn't even realize it because she was so near and dear to my heart. She was like my twin soul, and to
Hmm.
lose her in such a way because she had cancer, and to lose her at such a young age, it put me in a space of feeling like, God, are you serious? Like,
Yeah.
you really took her? Like,
Yeah.
you could have taken anybody else. There's a whole lot of other people.
I can give you a list of folks you could have taken.
Look, I was like, you could even take me because that's where I was. I'm like, you could take me, but you had to take her.
Yeah.
And I had to, one, I had a dear friend who had to get me to the place of realizing that 8 years later I was still stuck in grief
Mm,
because I had actually created a soul tie with my cousin. That woman was like, when I say my twin soul, my twin soul. And to lose her felt like I lost a part of myself. And so because I had created this tie in my
yeah.
soul with her, I couldn't let her go. And I had to go through so many steps to heal myself from that. And so I want to talk to you about some of the things that you had to do to get to the place of healing your own soul so that you could
Mhm.
counsel people that were walking through grief and trauma.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, and particularly with my mother, I had to get to a space, and this is kind of at the end of the book, but
Mhm.
I had to get to the place where I could see what was left in my life.
Mhm.
Because for so long, all I could see was that my mommy was gone. Like
Yeah.
that's all that I could process. I mean, I talked to my mother every day, multiple times a day for no reason other than, the wind
Yeah.
blew. And
Right.
so we had our routine. But I had to get to a place of recognizing that, yes, my mother was physically gone,
Mhm.
but she was most definitely still present in me, and all of the things that she had taught me and my brother and all of the gifts that she had given me throughout my life. But even more than that, I still had a husband here. I had
Mhm.
two children who were still here. At the time, my daughter was a senior in high school. So this was the beginning of her senior year. We had been walking with my mother through her illness since for 7 months. So from February of 2011 to September of 2011, we had literally been walking this journey. And I had to recognize that there was still life in my life. And
Yes.
so that's what helped me move through in that. But I it took me some time to get there because the pain was very real,
Mhm.
and the not want to and the I don't want to was very, very real and very present. But when I was able to shift my focus and see things through a different lens, and that lens being, there is still life in my
Mhm.
life,
Yeah.
and then being able to hold on to that. But as you were talking about your cousin, I love that you bring that up, because that's one of the things that I talk about in the book, and even when I'm teaching people about grief. Because when you say your cousin, but then when you describe the impact of that loss, because
Yes.
we talk about grief, and obviously when we talk about grief, a lot of times we think only about death, but grief is about loss. And I talk about some of those other things in the book, but specific to death, when you say your cousin, someone's like, "Oh, okay, your cousin passed away."
Right.
But it's not just about the title. It's about the deep relationship,
Yes.
the connection that was there with your cousin. And
Hmm.
so I had a similar experience last year. My uncle passed away, my mother's brother.
Mm.
But so he was my uncle, but
Yeah.
truly he was my father. So
Yeah.
that too colors the way we move through grief and the way we move through the process. And I always talk about it's the who, the what, the when, the where, and the how. We
Yes.
start teasing apart what really happened and how people move through those processes of grief. So I'm really glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I want to just welcome everyone that's been joining the show. Feel free to come in, share this out, invite people because even just recently, I know so many people that have lost a family member, people that have lost a job, people that have lost a significant relationship, whether it be through
Yes.
divorce or just breaking up of some type of friendship, breaking up business partnerships, and
Yeah.
all of those things contribute to grief, right? Because they impact us in such a traumatic way that it's difficult for us to figure out how do I process this and how do I move forward. And so one of the things I want to talk about from your book specifically, and again, her book is God Help Me, I'm Grieving, Finding Healing After Loss. You talk about having a clear understanding of your grief being by adequately addressing and healing from its effects on your life. And you said there are a few important characteristics that are vital to obtaining this outcome. And you refer to those as the 3 P's of grief. So let's talk about those three
Yeah.
P's of grief.
Yeah, so I think this is so important for people to understand. And the 3 P's of grief are simply that grief is perfectly normal, that grief is a process, and that grief is also personal. And
Yes.
so when we talk about this idea that grief is perfectly normal, because so oftentimes, as I said in the beginning, we really, as a society in general, we don't do a good job of helping people heal from grief. And so it's so important for us to understand that we're not going crazy. You're not going crazy. You're not losing your mind. There's nothing wrong with you. You're grieving, because oftentimes people, and very well-meaning people in our lives, can say things to us that if we're not clear on what grief is, we can start to believe, well, what's wrong with me?
Yes.
Well, am I supposed to be better by now? Well, maybe I
Mm.
should have gone back to work already. Well, maybe I should have given their clothes away already. Or, well, did
Woo.
I give their clothes away too soon? Well, maybe I shouldn't go to. All of those shoulds and oughts and all these
Yes.
rules that people in society can put on us can really complicate the grief process. When
Absolutely.
the reality is, grief is perfectly normal. There's nothing wrong with you. We all move through it in our own space and time, which gets to this idea of the fact that grief is a process. And
Yes.
we talk about that, in the clinical world, we hear about the stages of grief.
Hmm.
I talk about it in terms of waves, because when we hear stages, it's very easy to think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I move through these 5 stages. I put a nice neat bow on it and I'm good.
Yeah.
And that ain't how it works.
At all. Not at
Exactly.
all.
Not at all. Which can further complicate it for people, because they think, okay, well, I've gone through these 5 things. Well, why am I not better now? Because
Mm.
that's not how it works. And so I
Yes.
talk about it more in terms of waves,
Mhm.
and because that's how it comes at you. This idea of a surfer. If you see someone surfing and they kind of go out in the water, and a small wave comes along, and they can take that one, and then maybe they go a little bit further out, and there's one that's a little bit bigger, and it feels like it's going to knock you off the surfboard, but no, okay, you got it. But there may be one that comes along and it knocks you off, sends you down into
Woo.
the depths of the ocean, and you're
Yes.
just trying to figure out, God, please let me just come up for some air.
Mm.
But that is more how the grief process works.
Yeah.
And then the third thing is that grief is personal, and that simply means that we all move through the process, and we all heal
Yeah.
in our own way, in our own space, in our own time. And it looks very, very different on each one of us.
Yes.
I talk about my mother's death. I have an older brother. She was our mother. We loved her equally. She loved us equally. But the way that we moved through our individual processes was very, very different
Mm-hmm.
because we are different individuals. I share in the book a story about my husband and I talk about this every time that I talk about grief. You know where I'm headed because I see
Yes,
you
I am. Yes, I know.
laughing. Our fathers passed away about 2 months apart in 2009, almost 2 months to the day apart in 2009. And his father passed away in April. My father passed away in June. Obviously, Father's Day is in June. My father and I had a very complicated relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And so a couple of weeks after my dad's death, I was still struggling with some things. And, my husband said some things to me after that sent me into orbit. We are still happily married to this day.
Thank
Um,
God.
yeah, yeah, because it was one of those that, like, wait a minute, what?
Yeah, when I read it, I was like,
Yeah,
did she snatch him around the neck? Because what?
exactly, exactly. And it's so funny. He hates when I tell this story, but it is the absolute truth. And I tell people the best part of the story is that he's a psychologist, so he knows all the stuff that I know about grief. But the point that I make, and the reason I put it in the book, is because his goal was really not to send me into orbit, even though
Yeah,
that's what happened.
yeah,
His goal, it came from a space of he simply did not want to see his wife hurting,
yeah,
and he didn't know what to do.
yeah.
And that's oftentimes what happens with our friends and our loved ones and people that we care about, because none of us like to see people hurt. None of
Yeah.
us like to, and we want it to stop for them as quickly as possible. And unfortunately, we just can't do that for them. So we have to be able to sit with them in that space. So those are the three
Mm-hmm.
I talk about, and I think so important for individuals to understand when we're going through, but also to understand so that we can help people when they are moving through the process.
Yeah, I love that what you said about just sitting with them through it.
Mm,
And it takes a strong, solid um, person to be able to do that, because if they're not, if they're dealing with their own
mm,
issues and insecurities and maybe even grief themselves, it's
yeah,
very difficult for them to sit with you in that process. So, it's a blessing when you can pray in those friends that would be able to support you in the process of your grieving in the way that you need to, because
bingo. Yeah,
yeah,
you are
I've
on
been through that.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been through that, having those people that don't necessarily know how to support you. So they just think, God, like, why are you still crying? Shouldn't you be over this by now? It's been so long. Like, look, leave me alone. If you have nothing
Exactly.
good to say, just leave me alone and let me process through this the way that I need to. Right.
Yeah, it's. And I'm glad you bring up that point. Oftentimes when I'm talking about this, I talk about it in terms of you need Job's friends the first 7 days.
That's good. Yes.
You need the first 7 days worth of Job's friends. After that, just
They
and
got to go.
they gotta go. But that's who you need. And I also talk about, because you make a very valid point, I talk about screening your support system and knowing who you have in your circle.
Ooh, yes.
Because reality is everybody can't handle the weight of your loss. And it doesn't mean you have to fall out with people. It doesn't have to mean it doesn't mean you have to stop speaking to them. It just means you need to know who you have in your circle that's going to be able to support you and uphold you at a time when you don't have a whole lot to give. So that may mean that the friend actually that you may not talk to very often may be the friend in that season that you
Yes.
actually need to talk to every day, when the friend that you talk to every day, maybe you need to push her to one of the outer rings of the circle, and there
Yes.
are other things that she can do to support you, because
Mm.
she just may not be able to handle the weight
Woo.
of your loss
Oh,
during
that's
that
so
time.
good. That
Yeah.
is so good. I think about when my oldest brother passed away. He passed away 3 years ago, and then 2 months later, a good friend of mine from college passed away, and it was like, okay, look, Lord, I'm done. I'm, I'm
Yeah.
done. And those that were closest to me that I talked to every single day, like, they're weeping with me, they're falling out with me, and it was the ones that I didn't talk to all the time that would just
Mhm.
come in with just an encouraging word and then just step back and leave
Yeah.
me alone, right? To give me that time to process, to give me that time to heal. And so it is very important for you to know who in your circle can handle the weight of your
That's
pain
it.
and your grief, and
Yeah.
see you through it and sit with you through it.
And sit with you.
Sit with you through
Exactly.
it. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so Anyone that's listening, oh, okay, Tamila says, I know there's no time period for grief. How long do you sit with your friends during these times? That's an excellent question, Tammy. Thank you for sharing that.
That's a great question. And the short answer is as long as they need you to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because remember, and this is what I always say, oftentimes as the friend,
Mhm.
we're tired and we're weary of it simply again because we don't want to see them hurting, and because that's painful for us.
It
So,
sure is.
when you're sitting with someone, it's like, man, I just don't want her to hurt. If I could just help her feel better, if I could just get her through it. So, but again, the reality is grief takes as long as it takes. Now, there are some things clinically when we start looking, there's some indicators that may let us know that okay, perhaps we need to do a little bit more work. Perhaps we need to do some more pointed work with someone because of getting into what we call complicated grief. So that's something that
Mhm.
may be there. But in general, most of us move through the process in a way that is acceptable if
Mhm.
there's such a thing. We're healing at our own pace. We're
Yeah.
still getting up. We're still going to work. We're still doing the things that we need to do. We're
Mhm.
engaging. We're living. But the pain of the loss is still with
Yeah.
us. And there are
Yeah.
times when that pain manifests itself. And that's okay. Because if it didn't, this is what I would say, if
Mhm.
it didn't, then I would be concerned. If there was no
Mm.
response, then I would be concerned because I would be like,
Yeah.
well, wait a minute, what's going on? The
Yeah.
fact that someone expresses their grief
Mhm.
and expresses their emotion, that doesn't concern me. That says to me that
Mhm.
they're exact right where they need to be given whatever the magnitude of their loss has been.
Yeah. Ooh, that is so good. I never really thought about that, but let's read this comment from Annette. She says,
Yeah.
complicated grief. How do you handle that? Do you set boundaries if it's getting too heavy for you as a friend?
Yeah, that's a great question, Annette. I think
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. If so, I think it's twofold. If you are the friend who's supporting,
Mhm.
and you recognize that it is too heavy for you, and you need to step away. I think as a friend, that's a conversation that you can have and simply say, I love, Stephanie, hey, I
Mhm.
love you. I want to be here for you, but I need to be honest and say that I may not be able to be here the way that you need me to right now. So let's talk about maybe we need to let's call Tammy and let's see if what is her schedule like. Can she come and sit with you on Saturdays? Let's call Cindy. And so having that honest conversation because sometimes what happens is we pull away from the friend because we don't know what to do. It is too heavy. We haven't had the conversation. Now the friend who's in need is like, well, wait a minute, what happened? Where did she go? Now we got a fallout that
Yeah,
really didn't need to happen.
you're right.
Um, so yeah, I
Ooh.
think it's being honest and setting those boundaries. So if you are the friend that's feeling that way, and at the
Mhm.
same time, if you are the friend who's struggling and who has some, and you start to notice that that friend really isn't able to give you what you need, part of it, communication is key to all of this. So
Yes.
part of it is me saying to you, Stephanie, when you come over, actually, could you could you pick up the kids for me? Because what I may need you to do isn't what you're doing. It may, and I may need to tell you what I need. Maybe I need you to pick up the kids for me on Tuesdays and Thursdays because maybe it was a
Mhm.
Tuesday that my loved one passed away and I just can't get out of bed. Like something that
Yes.
simple. Maybe it's Stephanie, would you mind asking your husband if he could come and pull the garbage can out for me on trash day?
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
those things. Can you help me, call and try to organize some of this stuff? Or can you just take this pile of stuff and do it for me? Because
Yeah.
I just don't have the capacity right now. Where for you, you didn't know what to do. So maybe you were doing something totally different and it's getting on my last nerve. But because I haven't communicated to you
Yeah.
what I actually need, we're missing each other. So I think that's the responsibility on both sides of the fence.
And I think that's so helpful because if the person in grief cannot communicate what they need, it is up to that friend to say, hey, what do you need? Or here
Hmm.
are some of the things I'm able to do for you. Is
Exactly.
there something else you think you might need? Just to kind of jog their memory. Because when you're walking through grief, I, for me, I was like, I don't care what y'all do, just leave me alone. Like, I really was. I was like, I'm not answering the phone. I'm just gonna lay here with these covers over my head. I
Hmm.
I don't want to process or deal with this with you. I need to sit
Exactly.
with myself for this. I need to sit with God because I'm having a hard time dealing with this, right? And so it did take my friend saying, "Hey, what can I do for you?"
Yeah.
for me to
That's
start
key.
thinking. Go ahead.
Absolutely. No, I think that's key. What you're saying to help you think, and then sometimes it may be that friend just starting to throw things out to
Yes.
get things popping that perhaps you didn't think about it, you couldn't think about it. You go, oh yeah, actually I do need that. Oh,
Yes.
okay, yeah, actually that would be helpful. Or well, I don't know, but we can try it.
Yes.
Those kinds of things.
Excellent. Samantha says, what happens when you have that friend that is grieving and cannot communicate? Yes.
Yeah, that's a tough one, and I think in those situations, I think what's key is to be there, physically, as best you
Mhm.
can, and emotionally. And in that sense, I think it's really about what I like to call just a ministry of presence. And so you're watching, you're observing, you're listening to what they're not saying, but you're paying attention to what they're doing. And so then I think it goes back to what we just said. You start throwing out some ideas of, hey, I noticed that, you're having trouble eating breakfast in the morning. Why don't we just try to do a shake instead of you trying to eat a whole meal?
Yeah.
Hey, I noticed that, the mail is piling up. Would you want me to just kind of go through this and sift through it for you? Those very tangible, very practical things. Because here's the reality. When we're talking about grief, and we're talking about grief specific to death at this
Yeah.
point, when we're talking about death, the reality is, as much as we want the world to stop spinning, to let us get off
Yeah.
and sit over here, and then y'all keep doing what y'all doing, and when we
Yeah.
feel better, we go, okay, world, we'll jump back on. That's not how it works. The world keeps turning. Bills need to be paid. Children have to go to school. Football practice, baseball practice, gymnastics, this, that, the other.
Yeah.
Everybody wants their money every 30 days of the month. I
Yep.
mean, is what it is. Life keeps happening. And
Yeah.
so it's oftentimes you just need someone to help you with those very practical things of
Mm.
life that are not going to go away. And for a period of time, you just don't feel like dealing with or even have the capacity to deal with.
Yes. Yeah. The ministry of presence. I love that because it is so true that you need those people to be around you to
Hmm.
physically see what you're going through, what you might
Hmm.
need. And if you can't be physically present, I have a great friend of mine who, when she lost her mother, we live in different states. I was like, okay, we need to get on Zoom.
Yeah,
First, because I need to see you and I need to make sure that you're okay. And two, I need to surveil your space because I need to
exactly.
see you have stuff piled up. What do you have going on in the house?
Yeah,
Because that way I would know, like, what is it that I could do to help her even from afar, right?
absolutely.
Could I call in reinforcements where she was to be able to help her? So being
Bingo.
present for your friend, whether it is in the physical or through a virtual, since we live so much in the virtual world now, it's so helpful to that
Yeah,
person.
that is so, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things you said in your book that I really appreciated, and it was still in the first chapter, and it was about the way that we process and giving people room to process. You talked about it takes a full year from the time of your loss to cycle through all of the first. When I saw that, I was like, I got emotional because I was thinking, God, yeah, I remember when it was the first, birthday without that person, when it was the first
Yeah.
holiday. And I've lost a lot of family members during the holidays. So the holidays just didn't mean the same thing to me anymore because it was always about death, right?
Yeah.
So you have to give people the opportunity to cycle through those first so that the sting and the pain of them not being there anymore, you
Yeah.
can you can kind of start stepping through that, and you understand how to support them through those first. What are some of the ways that people could support someone through those first where that person is no longer with them?
Yeah, that is so huge, and you're right. And one of the reasons that that first year is so interesting and difficult at the same time is because it's almost like every time you think you're taking a couple of steps forward, something else hits. Because if we think about it, there's a holiday almost every month. Whether
Yes.
it's a major holiday, minor holiday. And if you're like my family, like we didn't need an excuse to get together just because the wind blew. So
Right.
and so again, you have the anniversary of their death, their birthday, Mother's Day, Father's Day, any other significant events, all of these kinds of things that happen in that year. But one of the things I think is so important, you're supporting we love and that we care about. The first thing I think is being aware, as
Mhm.
best we can, of these holidays, and people will let us know. I think technology is great now because even on Facebook you can see, oh, her mom's birthday's coming up.
Yeah.
Facebook will kind of tell you.
Yeah.
And even if you happen to wake up one morning and you see that a friend has posted something about their loved one who passed away, maybe you didn't know, but that's your clue now.
Mhm.
Oh, let me call, let me check in, let me see what they need today. And again, maybe it's just I just need to be there. Maybe if you do know ahead of time, hey, do you think you might want to go out to lunch, on your mom's birthday? Or do you think you might, would you like to go to the cemetery? Do you want me to go with you? Are you thinking about do you want to get out of the house? Do you want to be alone? Again, asking those questions, and their answer may very well be, I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's okay. So then the response is, whenever you wake up and you decide, call me, I'm here. And whatever you want to do, I'm going to be here. So if that's you want to stay home all day and we just text and we check in a couple of times a day, fine. If you wake up and you say, hey, I can't be here by myself all day, come pick me up,
Hmm.
I'm on my way. We're going to the mall. If we just need to drive around the freeway,
Yeah.
whatever that looks like, for those people that we love and care about. So again, and holidays are always difficult. The major holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, are always difficult for people because we have those traditions.
Yes.
Mother's Day, Father's Day. So I think the biggest thing is trying as best we can to get ahead of them, because it's not,
Mhm.
those don't move every year. We know when they're coming.
Yes.
you know, so having those conversations early, and I talk to people specifically about Christmas and Thanksgiving and thinking about, do you want to travel? Do you want to
Oh,
be on a
yeah.
plane? Do you want to be in the car? Do you
Mhm.
want to go to the cousin's house that everybody went to, or do you just kind of want to do something small?
Yeah.
Those are all conversations, and I think thinking through that as best you can ahead of time,
Mhm.
recognizing that because grief is its own animal, it may turn out a little bit different for you, but as much as you can, things I think is very, very helpful. I talk
Mhm.
about in the book, the first Thanksgiving, without my mother, was talk
Yes.
about a fiasco because I
Yes.
didn't plan.
Yes.
And it, talk about hit me upside the head. So I think planning as best you can is so very important. And again, having that support system around you, that you can fall back on when you need to.
Absolutely. So again, we're talking with Katherine Barner. She's the author of God Help Me, I'm Grieving, Finding Healing After Loss. And we've been spending the first half of the show just really talking about how you can process through loss, specifically as it relates to death. But there are so many other forms of loss that people experience, and they don't recognize it as loss, and they don't recognize that they're grieving, and they don't recognize that they need support and they need help to be able to get through whatever it is that they're dealing with. So let's talk about some of those other forms of loss that people could be grieving from, and maybe some signs that they're grieving without even knowing. And we have a question that says, what
Yep.
are some other ways besides leaning on friends can someone use to deal with grief?
Yeah, great question. I think that's an excellent question.
Yeah.
I always think that, and I say this, I always think it's important to have friends and family members that we can lean on. The reason I say that is because we weren't created to be in isolation. We were created to operate in community. But I do get that question, and I appreciate that. So, in addition to that, finding things that you just enjoy. So maybe it's, you enjoy bike riding, and for you, just being out in the open space and riding and connecting with nature. For me, I love the water. When I go snorkeling, I'm talking to Nemo and all the other fish, down there. Maybe it's exercise, things that just get your body moving. Maybe you like art. Maybe you just enjoy traveling. Maybe you're a reader, and so sitting by the lake or in your backyard or in your bedroom just reading a great book. Maybe you like dance and music. Those kinds are all different things that you can engage in. What I call things that bring you back to center, and things that speak to your soul, whatever that is for you, are all amazing ways that can help you move through your process. Because when you're connecting with that and you're slowly bringing yourself back to center, it helps the healing happen. So I do appreciate that question. It may not be always leaning on friends and family members. There are times when you may want to be alone, but in being alone, you're doing something that is going to facilitate your healing. I think that's the key.
Yeah, I love that. So I keep want to call you Dr. Barner. I, I'm probably just going to call you that. Maybe I'm prophetically speaking into your life. But
Listen, all I will say is that it's in the process, and
all
that's
right.
there are probably some people listening they didn't even know it. So I'm gonna just okay. So
All right.
thank you for putting that out. Yeah,
Amen.
it's in the works. Is all I'll say.
Amen. All right. All right. What about do you think it's a good idea that when you're processing through grief, like you said,
Mhm,
outside of leaning on friends, doing
mhm.
something that you enjoy, what about actually doing something new, something that you've never done before to spark?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I
Yeah.
think
I think. No, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say I think that's a great way to really take your mind off of that is to learn something new. Like I know this sounds funny to people, but ways that I process through, frustration, depression, grief, loss, all those things is I work out to workout videos in different languages.
I love it.
I don't have a clue what the people are saying. And I'm like, can I put up English subtitles? It won't let me. But I do that because one, I'm like, I need to try to force my mind to think about something different, right?
Mhm.
While I'm doing something I love, which is exercising. And then here it is. I could be subconsciously learning a whole nother language and I
There you
don't even
go.
know it, right? And it makes me feel so much better after I've done that because now my mind is thinking about something else. Like, wow, I was able to actually get through this workout and I don't even understand what the people
I
are
don't even know
saying.
what
I
you
just
were
have
saying. Yeah.
to force myself to figure it out.
I
So
think
you
that
do
is
that.
so cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I completely agree with you. That idea of finding something new and starting something new, whatever that may be,
Mhm.
trying things new, because it speaks to, as I was talking in the beginning about me recognizing that I still had a life in this life.
Mhm.
It's finding those things that I didn't even know that I liked. It's just kind of out there because you try it and no harm, no foul. Nobody's
Yeah.
hurt, nobody's upset. I'm just, I'm going to go out here and try it. Do I like ice
Mhm.
skating, roller skating, water skiing, whatever
Mhm.
it may be?
Yeah.
As you said, reading new books, exercising in a new language. I talk about doing those things that you just didn't have time. Maybe it's finishing a degree because you just
Mhm.
didn't have time to do it because
Yeah.
maybe you were taking care of a loved one and you weren't able to go back to school or finish school. Maybe it's starting the business. Maybe it is traveling to that place that you've always wanted to go to by yourself,
Yeah.
and that being the new thing, being a solo traveler.
Mhm.
But I completely agree. Yes, trying new and different things just because to see what is it going to spark in me. And if you love it, great. But if you don't, you tried it. You don't have
Yeah,
to do it again.
that's
Yeah,
right. I love it. All right, so let's switch gears. It's hard to talk about death so much, but these
I
are
know.
great
I know.
great tips and just tools, techniques that we can use to be able to shift out of the place of grief when we've lost a dear loved one. But what about those other types of loss that people experience? Let's talk
Yeah,
about some of those things.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. We talk about, there's divorce, and we just talk about loss of relationships. So that
Yeah.
could be divorce, that could be the breakup of an engagement, that could just
Hmm.
be a long-term romantic relationship, that could be a friendship,
Yeah.
that for whatever reason has come to an end. So there's that piece. We talk about the health, people
Hmm.
who have gone through and maybe going through significant health challenges that change the trajectory of their life. And so the grief comes from the loss of who I was and what I
Hmm.
can no longer do, and the loss of the capacity that I once had. So how do I now live my life in this body, given whatever those restrictions may be now, whether it's for a period of time or whether it is long term, depending on what that may be. Loss of jobs, and we know, just the past couple of years in the pandemic, loss of jobs, because oftentimes, right, wrong, or indifferent, we identify with our job, and
Yeah.
men. I won't, yeah, men tend to more than women, but women do as well. So
Yeah.
when that is gone, there can be a challenge of, well, who am I now? And so that loss of identity,
Woo.
what that looks like. Um, Oftentimes I talk about it even in retirement, which is an exciting time. You willingly said, hey, I'm going to retire. You're looking forward to traveling and doing all the
Yeah.
things, but there can be a period of grieving, like, well, wait a minute, it's
Yeah.
Monday at 7:30 and I'm not in the car headed to the office. What do I do? All of those types of things. I talked in the book, I talk about natural disasters. I never will
Mhm.
forget, I was seeing a young lady once. I think I may mention this in the book. who
Mhm.
had gone through Hurricane Katrina,
Yeah.
and her grandfather had given her a guitar, and she was just in such pain because that guitar had been lost in the hurricane. Well,
Yeah.
obviously, we can go buy another guitar, but it
Mm.
wasn't about the guitar. It was about what
Yes.
the guitar represented. It was because her grandfather had given it to her, the
Yes.
relationship that they had. He was no longer here. So it
Mm.
was much bigger than just a guitar.
Yes.
So all of those kinds of things can lead us, those types of losses can lead us into seasons and periods of grief. And I think it's important for people to understand that, because
Yeah.
oftentimes when we have those other losses, people will say, well, I shouldn't feel that bad, or I should be okay because nobody died. Well,
Mm.
that's true. Nobody died, but
Right.
something died. And so being okay with and giving yourself the grace and the space to say, no, it wasn't a person, but it was a thing. And that
Mm.
thing represented something to me, and something
Yeah.
very, very special and very deep.
And you have to, and I think you said this in your book, you have to find new ways of engaging
Hmm.
without that thing, right?
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
that is very difficult. I know for me, I'm divorced. And so
Mhm.
I went through a 2-year separation that prepared me
Y-
for divorce, right? So
Yeah.
I found a new way to live, kind of knowing that the divorce was going to, come to pass. And I
Right.
prepared myself for that. You talked about retirement. People don't recognize that when they're going into retirement, they really do have to start planning, truly planning for retirement, because
Yes.
when you've worked for a company for so long, or however long you worked there, and now you're leaving that job and you don't have a plan for what you're going to do for your life, you become stale. And my mom went through that. She retired. She didn't have a plan. She just thought, oh, I'm going to be doing this and doing that. And then that didn't happen. And unfortunately, her life kind of propelled. And, now she has Alzheimer's and she
Mhm.
can't even remember what her life used to be. Right. And
Yeah. It
so
looks very different.
it looks very, very different. And that's a whole other grieving process that she's going through, we're
Absolutely.
going through. Right. And so
Absolutely.
if you don't find new ways to engage, you will truly experience grief at a level you don't understand, because you've lost something that was dear to you, and it wasn't a
Hmm.
person, it was a thing. So, kind of let's
Right.
talk about that. What are some of the things that people could do differently to start preparing themselves to engage in life differently when they've lost a thing that was important to them?
Yeah, I think the first step is acknowledging the loss of the thing,
Yeah.
and acknowledging the impact of whatever that thing was. Not minimizing it, and not saying, well, I shouldn't, or it's not that big of a deal. Giving it the space and the honor that whatever that it deserves in your life for whatever it meant. And it doesn't, and recognize that it doesn't have to make sense to anybody other than you.
Right. That's right.
Because it was your relationship with the thing. So I think that's the first step is acknowledging that. Then the other piece is, as I said, similar to as we're talking about losses of a physical being, is thinking through and processing through, okay, do I want to replace this thing? And if so,
Mm.
how? Do I want a physical replacement of this thing? Or is there something else that I can put in its place that's similar? Or am I okay with letting it go completely and just embracing what it was in my life for that season? And any of those answers are absolutely okay, because it's what is right
Yeah.
for you in that given season of your life. There is no right or wrong. It's
Yeah.
what's right for you in that period of time.
That's good. Someone needs to put that up. It's what's right for you in that period of time. Don't let
Yeah.
anyone define for you what it looks like, because it's what's right for you in that period of time. I love that. Anyone have any questions? You're welcome to put them up. We'll throw them up on the screen, because this is a necessary conversation that people need to be open to,
Hmm.
because we will all experience loss in our lives
Yep.
in some form, and we need to know how to be prepared. We need to know how to process through that grief. We
Hmm.
need to know that, you talked about it earlier, ride the waves of that grief, right? And
Yes.
just like you know and I can't remember what it's called right now, but you talk about riding the waves of grief, and you talk about these different steps that we
Hmm.
go through to ride the waves. Like, The first one was denial,
Yep.
right? We deny that it even exists. So
Oh
kind of
yeah.
take us through some of those stages, those waves that we go through, so that we can understand for ourselves when we face the grief, what we might experience in stages.
Sure. Yeah. So there traditionally, there are what we call the five stages of grief, and so it's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And when we hear, denial, it's oftentimes that it's that shock, that first blow of wait a minute, what what are you talking
What
about?
just
What
happened
do
here?
you mean? Yeah, exactly, what you talking about, Willis? That kind of thing. But I often say that, and I was talking to someone about this a couple of earlier in the week. I was on another podcast, and what I say is that I think God is so gracious in the way that He created us, that there are certain things that we literally cannot handle the magnitude of. And so
Ooh,
I believe
yes.
that the way He has created us, and I believe that that period of denial can very well be a self-protective mode for us at times, until we can get to a space where we can actually encode the reality of what has happened in our lives, particularly when we're talking about very traumatic incidents that are going on. I think I share in the book of a lady who very, very traumatic incident happened with her husband.
Mhm.
So
Ooh,
I
yeah.
think in that way, God is very gracious to us in
Mhm.
giving us that protection of, you know what, no,
Yeah.
I'm just not even gonna listen to that right
Mm.
now, because
Yeah.
we simply can't handle the impact of that traumatic loss. And we will then make our way through. But I think there are times initially that it's there, and then the denial, then there's the anger, as we talk about the bargaining, the depression, and the acceptance. And when I like to talk about depression, because again, when we hear that
Yeah.
clinically, when we talk about depression, is not the same thing. I prefer the term sadness,
Mhm.
when we're talking about grief, because the fact that someone is crying doesn't mean they're depressed. There's some very clinical things that we go through to say that someone is clinically depressed, and that's very, very different from this what we're talking about during the stages.
Mhm.
But someone crying, someone feeling like they don't want to get out of bed,
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily mean that they're depressed. It means that they're having a very real response to loss. Now, if that goes on for an extended period of time,
Mhm.
they're not taking care of themselves, what we call activities of daily living, they're not able to go
Okay.
to work, they're not able to eat, those kinds of things. Okay, now from a clinical lens, I may start looking at something a little bit differently. But there's also a time factor in there as
Mhm.
well. So I
Yeah.
think that's very
Before
important.
before you go on, I just want to say
Mhm.
thank you for clarifying that, because I think we use the term depression so loosely.
We
And I mean, I've said it, and now you said that, I'm like, oh, I guess I've just been sad.
Yeah, like it is really okay to be sad about the fact that someone that you love passed away, or that you lost something. Like, that's a normal human emotion. And it's
Mhm.
okay if you're sad for longer than today. Like,
Yeah.
as a clinician, I'm not really concerned about that. I'm like, okay, when you give me the story of
Mhm.
whatever you experienced, I'm like, okay, that makes sense
Yeah.
given what you went through. Now, in 6 months, if you still can't go to work, if you're still not getting out of
Mhm.
bed, if you're not taking a shower, if the kids are having to
Woo.
make their own cereal, okay, now as a
Yeah.
clinician, I get my antenna is way up, because now we're
Mhm.
dealing with something else. But
Yeah.
initially, I'm okay that you might not want to get dressed on Saturday because you had to get dressed 5 days to go to work, and Saturday you're like, nope, not today. I'll be in my moo all day long. So
So everyone that needed to hear that, that was for you, right? That was for you. That you may not be depressed, and you don't want to, start labeling yourself and throwing yourself into a state of mind that you're not really in. So call it what
right,
it is. You might
yeah,
just be in a sad place, right? You might just need somebody to talk to.
yeah,
But if you start doing some of the things that Dr. Barner is talking about, like, you're not taking care of yourself, and you're not able to live your daily life, that's a whole
right.
nother situation. And you need to seek support for that. And we encourage you
Absolutely.
to seek support for that.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about, and this has been so good. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want it to end. But this right here, the faith factor, I'm gonna tell you. Okay, when I got to this section, I was like, yeah, there we go. There we go with the believers, with the Christians that say, "Oh, you should be over this by now." Ooh,
Yeah.
maybe you just didn't pray hard enough. Maybe your prayers are just not tapping into heaven because you really should be over this by now. Please, please educate the people about that. So
Yeah,
that's
I had to add that chapter in because you're right. We very well meaning, sisters and brothers, believers who again, don't want to see others in pain, but who also don't necessarily understand the process will say things to us like, you just need to pray about it. Haven't been praying,
yeah.
or you exactly, you just need to talk to God. Well, I have been talking to him, but the reality is like I'm hurting and I'm sad because this happened. And I walk through there in that chapter. I try to give some very practical examples from scripture for those folks who struggle with that, because we can harm people when we say things to them. If they, again, kind of goes back to the 3 P's. If we don't understand grief, but also if we don't understand how our faith works, God doesn't disqualify you because you're expressing the pain of your loss. He didn't disqualify anybody. And so I walk through scripture, and the 2 examples, and I'll give one. The one that I like to hang my hat on all the time is Job.
Yes.
And in particular, I didn't put this in the book, but in particular, the example I give is, I call her Miss Job. She gets a bad rap because in chapter 2, she gets a bad rap because she says to her husband, "You should curse God and die."
Yep.
But the reality is, everything that he lost in chapter 1, she lost too. Like, those were her children as well. But when we get to the end of the book and we see that God restored everything, nowhere in scripture in that book does it say that he got another wife. So those 10 children that came at the end had to be hers too, which means that she moved through her grief process.
Look, I put the book down. Say that again.
So in chapter 2, she was moving through the process, the reality of having just lost everything that she lost. Now, was it the best response? Maybe not, but we could put her in any one of those categories: denial, anger, wherever we want to put that there. But I think and if we're honest with ourselves, when we first experience loss, sometimes we can say stuff that isn't completely right. And that when we have a little more time, we will go back and recognize, okay, yeah, that maybe I shouldn't have said that exactly like that.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the examples. Like I said, that particular example isn't in the book, but I do talk about Job, and I talk about how he moved through and how he says, God, why did you even let me be born? Like if this was gonna be it, you could just take me out before my mom even had me.
Yes.
But again, at the end, then we see what happens. So I think it's a testament to how he moved through the process. And I give some other examples in there because I think that's so key for believers to be able to hold on to. And I talk about that being your faith defense. When people come to you and say off the wall stuff like, you just need to pray about it, again, as if I haven't been praying, or all of the other things that we hear.
I'm like, I see comments like coming over here, and I'm like waiting for them to come on the screen. But yeah, Shay says she's blown away. She didn't think about that, and she has to go back and read it again. I am blown away too. That's why I almost threw the book across the room. I had to make sure I kept it nearby. I'm like, I still need it.
I say that all the time because I was the same when I was reading, I was studying, and that hit me. I got to the end. I was like, wait a minute. I literally I called my pastor. I was like, hey, I need you to clear something up for me. Like, it doesn't say anywhere that Job had another wife. No. So again, so she was there at the end, and I think that is such an example for us to understand and recognize that it's hard. And it goes back to the point of what I said, grief being personal, in that Job and Miss Job, they moved through it very differently. Their responses were very different. But in the end, they had gone through the process and then
My
and made it
God.
to their point of healing.
Yeah, I love how you use the examples from the Bible because it is true. Everything regarding life is
Yeah,
in the Word of
it's
God.
in there.
It's in there. You use the example of David when it came to bargaining, and I'm like, that is the
Yeah.
best example ever. When he bargained for his baby's life.
Listen, and who among us wouldn't do that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I am so grateful that you put that chapter in because it's necessary, especially for us as believers that, we have to understand that, yes, we have faith and
Hmm.
yes, we trust in God, but we go through grief as well. And
We
we get
do.
to process it just like anybody else. So
Exactly.
allow people the space to move through that in the way
Yeah.
that they need to and don't use God and they're maybe not having the strongest relationship with God as a reason for, why you might say the things you say to them in
Absolutely.
their grief. So let's get to the healing part because that's what people really need to know when it relates to grief and not staying stuck. And before I go on, because I've been forgetting to say this, running across the screen. So those who listen on the podcast, we will make sure that this is attached in the podcast comments as well. But you can grab Catherine's book. We have the link running across the screen. I also will have Catherine's link to her book in my bio in my link tree, so you'll be able to grab it there. It is, like I said, it's a quick read. It's a very short book, but it is so jam packed with such phenomenal dynamic information to help you understand grief, to be able to process through it in the way that you need to, and really ensure that you have the right support system around you. And so make sure you grab the book. We'll also be putting up Catherine's contact information as well. So you'll be able to reach out to her. If you are experiencing grief, that's what she is. She's a grief and trauma expert. And so we want to make sure that you have opportunities to connect with her if you are still walking through grief and haven't been able to move to the healing part of it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about healing. Healing is possible. And you say here, healing comes in different forms for every individual, but there are some common activities to guide you along the path. And then you said a way to minimize the effects of that blow and maintain your spiritual stability is to focus on the following acronym. And you give an acronym, which is grief. And I'm like, this is so perfect. So
Yeah.
I only want you to give a couple of them because I don't like,
Okay.
for you to give away the whole
All
book
right.
because the goal is for people to buy the book.
Yeah. We
To
won't give it
read.
all to them. Okay.
Yeah. So tell us.
So maybe I'll do the first one and the last one.
Perfect.
So I use an acronym, grief, and so the G stands for go to God in prayer daily, and it's really this simple. Because oftentimes when we are moving through grief, particularly as believers, when we're going through grief, it can be hard to and some of that anger that we experience in the waves can very well be directed at God.
Yes.
And what I say to folks is that's okay. Like he's really not moved by that. It's not
Yeah.
like, he's gonna be like, oh my goodness, Catherine's mad at me. He all right.
He can handle it.
Yeah, he can handle it. So I go to God in prayer daily. And I say that because even the fact that you are praying to him, even if you are angry, even if you are despondent, even if you are hurt, whatever it may be, the fact that you're still talking to him says by default that you believe that he's there, that he's listening, and that he can do something about it. Otherwise, you wouldn't be talking to him.
Oh, that's so good. That is so good.
So I say start there. Now, you may only be able to say, Lord help. That may be all you can say for a period of time, depending on where you are. And that's okay. Because saying that says that you believe that he can help. And he hears that and he honors that. And as you move through, perhaps they're deeper and they're longer than they're more, maybe more specific things that you say in specific areas that you say, God, I need you to help me here or there. But if all you got is a Lord help in the morning, okay, just go with the Lord help. He understands what that means.
Yes.
And then so there's so it's GRIEF, and so there's an acronym for the I, the R, the I, and the E. I can't spell today. And then the F. I'll give y'all the F. The F is fellowship with other believers. And again, I say that because we really were not created to operate in isolation. We were created to live in community. And
Mhm.
when we are moving through seasons of grief, sometimes our natural inclination is to be alone.
Yeah.
I want, because you said it, when you were talking about when you were going through
Mhm.
it, I know I went through the same thing.
Yeah.
I won't be bothered. Don't call me. Don't talk
Just
to me.
leave me alone. Just
Just leave
leave
me
me
alone.
alone.
I'm not answering this phone. You
Mhm.
can text me 75 times and I'm
Yeah.
not responding.
Exactly.
But it's so important to fellowship with other believers, because when this is example I give, if I'm moving through a difficult season and the only person I have to talk to about me being in that difficult season is me, I don't have a whole lot to give me.
Yes.
Okay. But if I'm fellowshipping with other believers, if I'm and I'm not talking about, you got to go out to, a convention of 500 other sisters and
Yeah.
it may just be you and one or two other girlfriends, or
Yeah.
it may be you just going play golf or basketball with one or
Mhm.
two of your other boys.
Yeah.
That's still somebody outside of yourself who can help challenge some
Yes.
of the thinking that you may be experiencing, some of those negative emotions that you may be having. They can
Mm.
help you process that and help
Yeah.
you challenge some of those negative thoughts that unfortunately are very, very normal and come.
Yeah.
Because again, if the only person I'm talking to about how bad I'm feeling is me, I, all I have is some bad to give me. I
Yeah.
need somebody to help me challenge that and somebody to help me process through that. So that's the G and that's the F. And you got to get the book to find out the R, the I,
Yeah.
the E.
Get the book because it's so helpful, and I definitely understand what you mean when you talk about that. The body of believers to help you and support you through. Because when I was going through probably my first couple of weeks of grieving the loss of my oldest brother, I I was in that space. I was like, "Don't y'all talk to me? I don't want to hear it." And
Mhm.
I couldn't even talk to God because I was infuriated.
Yeah.
I was infuriated. I was like, "I cannot believe this. It was sudden. It was unexpected." It was like, "Are you serious?" Right?
Right.
And after the first week, I was like, "All right, let me, Lord help me," was my prayer. That's all I could utter. I was like, "Lord help me." After that second week, then I had one of my good friends that she reached out to me, and I don't know what that girl said. And I don't remember what she prayed, but there was something that ignited in me at that point. And
Mm,
it was the first time I was able to pray for myself and
yeah.
pray myself through my grief. And I was so grateful for her because honestly, just like you said, if
Hmm.
I had to just keep depending on myself, I would have stayed locked up in that room with the covers over my head and I would have never been able to pray that type of prayer. It probably
Absolutely.
would have been so much longer. But because she activated something in me, I was able to pray and it began to lift that heavy spirit off of me. And so you need that. You need those
Yeah.
faith filled believers to support you through your grief.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I'm not even talking about. It may not be, when we talk about fellowship with other believers, that may not necessarily mean you're going to church and the Bible said
Right.
all that. Yes, those are things that we know we need to do, and we want to get back to that. But it may be what you just said. It may just be, I need y'all to come to the house,
Yeah.
And the example I give a lot of times I'm teaching is you need those friends who are gonna do for you what that paralyzed man's friend did for him when they literally carried him
Woo!
up the side of that house
Yes.
and dug out the roof, and they put him
Lowered him
down
down.
lowered him down into the presence of Jesus. He couldn't get there by
Mm.
himself, but he had a group of friends who knew if we can get him here, we know he can be okay. And that's exactly what you just described in your friend.
Woo.
So when we talk about having that circle of people and
Mm.
screening that circle, that's what you got to think about. Who in this circle can hold me up,
Woo.
and who
Jesus.
literally may have to carry me? Because I just don't have it right
Woo.
now. I'm going to get it, but who is my girlfriend that can
Yes.
literally carry me right now and
Yes.
into the presence of God when I
Woo.
can't get there for myself?
Look, I don't know if this is hitting y'all like it's hitting me. I'm over here hitting my chest because it is like my heart is racing over this because I think about how I always said I need my Aaron and my her. I need those people that
Yes.
hold me up when I'm in
Yes.
the battle. And grief is a battle, right? It's a battle.
Yeah.
the enemy wants to take you into that trap of believing you will never come out of this thing. When you have those people that will hold you up in
Yes.
prayer and support you and will pray you through, even when they are not on the phone with you, even when they're not in your presence, but they stay in prayer, they stay on their knees burn with prayer
Yes.
for you. That's the type
Yes.
of people that you need. So I am like, whoo, this conversation
Yeah.
has lit something in
This
me.
this
And
is so good.
Tammy said, I done threw my shoe at the screen. She done threw her shoe at the screen.
Oh
Oh
my
my God.
goodness.
Oh
Uh,
my God. I know we're like over time, but I
yeah,
just want us to like wrap up by talking about
sure.
moving forward. And most significantly, you said take inventory of what remains. And you
Yeah.
talked about this a little bit at the beginning. And I think that really is so, so important to end with,
Yeah.
that we have to take inventory of the things that still
What's still
remain.
here? Yeah.
Whew.
And that, like I said, for me, that's where the healing really started. Like I said, because I was, uh,
Mm,
I literally did not know. I knew that other people obviously,
yeah.
had gone through without their mothers, but I
Whew.
literally didn't know. And I think it was more of not knowing what my life would be, because she was such a significant part of my life. But when really started to pay attention and look at what's still here,
Yeah.
what do I still have? What do I still have to live for? Who do I have to live for? What do I have to all when I started doing that, that's when things really opened up. So I think it's so key to look at what still remains.
What
When you
still
look at
remains.
the inventory, what's still here is, other family members, jobs, businesses, like I said,
Mm,
things that you've put on hold, that you may have had to, things that have just kind of been you've been mulling over in the back of your head that for whatever reason you just haven't done, but
mm,
now's the time that you can, and where that may propel you in your life, particularly if it's things that can literally shape someone else's life.
yes.
What has God been kind of, nudging you about
Mm,
that you just haven't done, again, for whatever reason, whether it was time or fear? What has that been? What is he calling you to do? And so those are the things that can help move us forward. And once you get to the other side of grief, are you gonna cry? Yeah, well, you don't always cry. are you
yeah.
are you going to always remember? Absolutely. Unless somebody hits you in the head and you get amnesia.
Right. Right.
Forgetting is not the goal. The goal
Mm,
is to be able to remember without the sting that was there at the beginning of the loss. The goal is to be able to remember, and I may cry, but they're
mm,
different tears now.
yes.
They're not the same tears. They don't have
Yes.
the same sting. I can cry and be laughing at the same time.
Yes.
And so that's when you've made it to the other side. And when
Yeah.
you can, the other thing I say is when you can think about, because so oftentimes, particularly when we talk about death, when we think about the death for a very long period of time, we can only think about the time of the actual death and what happened. When
Yes.
you know that healing has started and when healing has really come is when you can think further back than the
Mm,
loss. You can remember, when you were a little kid or a teenager, or when you did this with mom or brother or sister. You can think further back than the loss, because the lens has opened up for you and you're starting to see it from a different lens now.
okay. Whew.
Healing is indeed possible, and I am proof of that.
Yeah, we're living witnesses
Yeah,
that healing is
it
possible.
is. It is.
And I am so honored. I'm so
Oh
honored,
my
Catherine,
gosh.
that you came today and you shared with us and you talked to us about this whole grief process and healing from trauma. And I'm so just honored that you shared this space with me tonight. I'm so grateful for everyone who listened live, for everyone who will listen on the replay, for everyone who's going to listen through the podcast. This was definitely a show to remember. It's one that I pray you all will share out, share with all of your friends and your family, because we know that this is a conversation that people need to be open to, because we want there to be healing. We do not want
Yeah.
people to stay stuck. We don't want people to live in their grief. We want people to be healed. So get your copy. God help me. I'm always like off. God help me. I'm grieving. Finding healing
Yes.
after loss. Dr. Katherine Barner. How can they connect with you? I know on Instagram you're at Mrs. Cat Speaks. Is that correct?
Yes, that
Okay.
is correct. So actually, on all social media, to make it real simple, I'm at Mrs. Cat Speaks. That's where you can text me. I mostly hang out on Instagram and LinkedIn. I do still hang out on Facebook, but folks can also find me on my website. It's katherinebarner.org. And that will take you to, you can order the book there. You can also get the book on Amazon. That will also take you to my Living Beyond Loss Academy, which is a program that we do specifically on grief. It also takes all of the stuff that you need to know, takes you to the Sister Speak Up Society, which is the work specific to, is the trauma work specific to African American women survivors of childhood sexual abuse. Feel free, you can email me, DM me on Instagram, message me on Facebook, any of that good stuff. You can email me. It's Katherine@katherinebarner.org. And I'm happy to connect with you all that way. This has been a pleasure for me. Thank you so very much for having me. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I just appreciate you for what you are doing. And this has been great. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for your amazing questions, the comments. I saw it flowing. I'm like, oh God, like I can't keep up. But I'm so grateful for all of you who joined us tonight. Again, listen on the replay, share this out. Make sure that you're having these conversations with your friends and your family, those that you love, because it's important that we all know how to process through grief, and we can do it together because we are each other's support system. We are our brother and our sister's keeper. And
We
so
are.
we want to make sure that we are sharing this message out so that we can truly find healing after loss. So thank you all. Thank you, Katherine, so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate you all. I honor you all. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks for the next story time with Stephanie. I'm your host, Stephanie Outen. God bless and have a good night.